Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Molly.
I'm so happy to see you.
I'm so excited to get to chat with you.
Um, so transparently, Hannah and I have been friends for what are we calling it? Like 8 years?
Sounds about right. It's
It's
definitely
great.
been a while. Yeah.
And so
Yeah. So much
I
has unfolded over the last
so
eight
much
years for
happens
both
in
of us.
8 years. When you're living a big full life, so much can happen in 8 years. And you and I live big full lives. Look at us now. So so Hannah's here to talk about her book Plenty, which is so good. So I'm not even done with Plenty yet. Now I wanted to say, here's the picture of an eating disorder. Okay. Hannah's first book, Feast. Like I binged that. I read that book in a day and a half. And I texted Hannah and I was like, I just devoured that book. But Plenty, since it's short story, so that's like my binging, right? But Plenty, since it's short stories, it's like I'm restricting it. I just never want it to end. I was like that with Tina Fey's autobiography, but oh my gosh, I just never want it to end. And so I'm just really, basically, we could talk about my eating disorder, but we're going to talk about your book. But anyway, these are wonderful books, and I'm really fascinated by a lot of parts of you, and I think your writing is incredible because I think it's just like you throw your heart on those pages, and you're such a talented writer. And I'm also really interested in how you and I have both dealt with our eating disorders, which is in kind of different ways and kind of really similar ways. And I love that for our audience, right? Because if somebody tells you that there is one way to do anything, run away. Run away. So, congratulations on your second book. It's getting so much notoriety, which it really, really deserves. And I'm so excited for you. And I think my first question is, what is it like for you to be writing about like your eating disorder? Really, in the short stories, it really weaves in to almost every part of it. And in your first book, Feast, it's a lot about your eating disorder. You really take us there. Talk me through that.
Yes. So, first of all, thank you. I feel, first I was going to say, oh, I think that's the best compliment you can give a writer, that you want to just binge what they're writing. And then I thought, well, it's actually quite a compliment to say you really want to savor what they're writing. So I'll take them both.
I have every compliment for you. I'm multi-talented
Fantastic.
like that.
So writing about my eating disorder was, first of all, terrifying. For so many years, my eating disorder was my deepest, darkest secret. It was the biggest shame. I told no one, not my best friend, not my mom, not even my therapist, which is probably weird, but
Well, you'd be
that's how,
surprised.
yeah, that's how deeply ashamed I was about it. So to take
Hannah, can you
that
say
thing
that
and
again? Can you
write
just
it
say that,
down and then,
Hannah, can you just say that's how deeply ashamed I was by it? Because it just went out again.
sure. That's how deeply ashamed I was of my eating disorder. And so then to take that deep shame, write it down on paper or on my Word document, and then publish it in a book for anyone, random or not random, to read it. It felt like a huge leap of faith. And
What inspired it? Because it's a beautiful memoir. You're really young to write it. Like, what inspired? Like, okay, I'm going to write this first book about the book. In my opinion, the book is about your eating disorder paralleled with your love of food, which is, I mean, we have really different experiences of an eating disorder, which I really want to get to. But like, how did you decide to do that for the first book? What inspired that?
I've always loved to write about my life. And I think in recovery, I learned how much my eating disorder was this kind of cloud hanging over my life. So it felt almost impossible to tell a true story of my experience and to not talk about this thing that colored everything, even though it probably took me a long time to see how deep that influence was. And I feel like it's the coolest kind of alchemy to take. I mean, I think it's like what we do also in recovery, to take this thing that has, for me anyway, has been like the most painful, secretive, lonely, awful experience, and then to turn it into something that becomes like, hopefully, you know, a thing of value and even beauty. Like that's like alchemy. It's like magic, and I think that is such a cool gift. And it feels almost like making all of that darkness, like the shedding light on it, making it worthwhile. It feels amazing that I get to do that, even though the whole process has been difficult.
Yeah. To say, I mean, right. I wrote 10 pages of my story and I slept for, I don't know, 7 days. I was like, it was like the longest marathon. I was like, all right. So we're using some language that I don't know if our listeners know about, and I want to get, I mean, if they don't know about it, they ought to know about it. Am I right? So you're
Absolutely.
saying this phrase 2 or 3 times. You're saying in recovery, in recovery, in recovery. So how are you defining that word, in recovery? In recovery, we learn, how do you define that?
Um, I think for me, recovery meant asking for help, going to share, like being honest about what was going on inside my head and what I was doing with food, and joining a group of like-minded people who got it, which I was amazed, because I thought nobody got it, but lots of people get it.
So
So
you went to one of these like circles. So can you talk just for fun? What was it like when you went to a circle of people telling the truth for the first time with your eating disorder?
I was kind of horrified at first, because they were saying out loud these things that I didn't even say to myself. Like, they were kind of that deep dark secret that I mentioned, was they were just like chatting about it as if it was no big deal at all.
Wait,
And
and you
then
know what the best part too is? Sometimes they're even laughing about it. You know what I mean? Like
that was that, yeah.
yeah, I took it out of the garbage and everyone's like, hilarious. Me too. And you're like, whoa, huh?
Yes, that astounded me. Right, there was like a levity that I was amazed by and shocked by. Right, and then they were like laughing and giving each other hugs, and then chatting about like other things, and my mind was blown. I didn't know that people could talk about this stuff, and it was like my insides had been like turned inside out. So I knew. I mean, it was terrifying, but I am glad like some part of myself knew that that was where I belonged, and
Mm.
that was where I needed to be. And all of these kind of like diets and self-help books that I had been pursuing in search of some sort of healing were like kind of scratching the surface in a way, and this felt like just scooping out the insides and getting to the heart of it. And I was like, oh, this is what I need. These are my people. Even though I had a million other doubts and thoughts also going on, I'm glad
Can
that
you
there
say that
was
again?
part of
Can
me
you
that
say,
knew enough.
Hannah, can you say, I had a million other doubts because it went out, but we're doing great.
Okay. I had a million other doubts and concerns and thoughts and chatter going on in my head, but I'm so grateful that a bigger part of me thought, these are my people. This is where I need to be. And I think I went back the very next day.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that makes like all the sense in the world, right? Because I remember it's so funny to read someone's story. I'm like, because at that point in the story, but like, at that point in the story, you're pretty eating disordered, right? And I really relate to this because I had a double life of being an eating disorders therapist with a deep raging eating disorder. And here you are, deep in the world of food and eating, like, counting the calories on how much cheese you put in, hating yourself for loving food. And, that's a real disconnect. And so in my experience as a therapist and as a human, it's like, you threaten that part of you that thinks it's protecting you with all this like love and humor and levity and healing. And that eating disorder is like, straight no. I hate that's well, I first went to those circles. I was like, these people are weird. I hate them. And I would journal during the meetings. And one day this is what came out of my hand. Swear on my life. Molly, you hate yourself. And it was the most true thing, right? I hate these people, the most lovely people I ever met in my life to this day.
I
What?
had the thought too that maybe these people could help me, but like I don't want to like be their friends or
Oh
like
my
get
God,
too
me
close.
too.
God forbid.
Right.
I'm just gonna like take the, just take what they have to, and then right, years passed and I'm surrounded by like real love and understanding from these amazing people.
Yeah. So what was that like when you were in that sort of double life of being in the food industry, like, and not letting yourself eat? Like, what, can you take us there?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about it because in some ways it feels so far away now, but it's about 10 years later. And in other
And
ways,
like a kid and a half in America. I mean, you really nailed it from that moment.
I yeah, I mean, well, a lot of things have unfolded in life, but just the way, but the biggest thing that's unfolded is the kind of rewiring of the way that I think and experience life. And yeah, I just thought that like this was sort of my burden to bear, that outwardly because I do still to this day, I do love food. I find joy and connection and fun in making food and sharing food with people. I write about food. I think it's a beautiful thing. But right, but then I also was terrified of food. I
Hannah, can you
hated my
say it again?
body.
Hannah,
I
Hannah,
would
Hannah,
bin
can Hannah, can you say it again? But I was also terrified of food and hated my body. It just went out again. But we're doing great.
but I was also terrified of food. I hated my body. I kind of knew that this really tight grip I had on restriction was tenuous at best. I would try with all my might to starve myself because I wanted to have a smaller body and succeed for various short lengths of time. And then those times the pendulum would swing the other way. Biology would happen. I would binge. I would wake up feeling awful physically, emotionally, spiritually. And then the cycle would repeat. And I just thought that I was going to have to live that way forever. And it's a really exhausting way to live. And right, and to put up this facade that nothing was wrong when this was occupying so much of the space in my brain and my heart all the time. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's just a rough way to spend the day.
Well, it's such a double life too. And if you think about, I mean, I have the chills all over my body as you're saying it, but yeah, it's just it's such dissonance, right? Like, and I think, at least as I read your book, and I know from I also had to acting like everything is okay is so exhausting, isn't it? Because there's this, untapped thing inside of you just screaming at the top of its lungs, and sometimes you catch it when it's in jail with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest lessons that I think I'm still having to learn from recovery, is that I used to think, right, that I needed to present this really perfect,
Wait, yes,
shiny
Hannah,
exterior to the world at
Hannah,
all times to be.
Hannah. I used to think I had to present the shiny exterior. This is so important. So get to that
Okay.
one.
I used to think that I had to present this shiny, perfect exterior at all times to be loved, to be accepted. And I really believe that. And wow, oh my gosh, it takes a huge amount of energy to try to, because nobody is shiny and perfect all the
I
time.
just don't
And
trust people like that. Like, I'm like, can you
no,
just have a bad day? Cause I have a lot of bad days. Like,
and that's what I learned. It's like that's not what I love about people who I love. I love the sharp edges, and that's what makes that. People trade embarrassing stories. They don't trade stories of the time when I was awesome. It's like the things that kind of make us human. So it's just
yeah.
such a relief. I mean, I'm still learning all of this stuff, but it's such a relief to not have to never have a bad day.
Well, I actually say you deciding that you didn't want to live in that secret anymore. It sounds like, really actually changed a lot of other lives. You write in the book, that you wrote this essay, right? And then you said people I'd never suspected had struggled began confessing their own stories. My friend, the Instagram famous baker, had starved herself until she landed in the hospital. The wellness blogger who couldn't stop getting up in the middle of the night to binge on gluten-free goodies, the binge eating server. I mean, it's actually, I think you coming to your truth really healed many. And so what was that like for you, starting to understand that about the women in your industry, which is what Plenty is about?
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, even so before the first book Feast came out, I would still say I'm working on a book, and people would ask what it was about. So I practiced sharing this thing, and I was at first just shocked how many people said, "Oh, I really have struggled with bulimia. I've struggled with binge eating. Whatever." Almost everyone, or if it wasn't themselves, it was someone close to them. And at first, it was just, and I still feel this way, just so reassuring to have that reminder in this like very visceral way that I'm not alone. But it was also got to be very sad, because it really does feel like nobody is completely free of this. And even people who might struggle like only a little bit, so many people relate. And navigating this world of food and the patriarchy and diet culture and everything, I think is a challenge for most human beings.
To say the least. I mean, it's like basically in our water at this point, which I really want to get to. But tell us a little bit about, you're kind of short and dirty on what Plenty is about. I mean, as I'm only 3/4 the way through.
So in some ways, I feel like Plenty is the sequel to Feast, and in some ways, I feel like it's not. It's its own book. It's about deciding to start my own little family, meeting my now husband, and first having a miscarriage and then having a baby. And it's also about finding my community of women in the food world, from a barge pilot to a cheesemaker to a sommelier. Just kind of women working in the trenches of the food and hospitality world, who either were my friends or who I really wanted to be my friends.
Mm. It's so good. I was just having this, and I think that the way that you weave in the truth of, I don't know, just I try not to personalize when some of my eating disorder stuff comes back. Like, I don't think it's a function of me not being healed. Actually, in some ways, as you're talking, I actually sometimes think it's a function of getting me more compassionate and getting me more open and getting me more inquisitive about myself and the world. And there's that story in there when you meet your husband, who I know you just like love so much, and it's so beautiful. And he buys you the ring, right? You're in this. Can you tell us that story?
Absolutely. So my husband is like usually a pretty understated kind of guy. Um, and so but, and yet he had the biggest proposal gesture on New Year's Eve on our trip to Paris, on this beautiful bridge overlooking the city.
Oh, can you say
And
it
I mean,
again,
it was
Hannah?
really
Hannah,
perfect.
overlooking the city. Just take a breath, because I think the internet's just going in and out. But so overlooking the city on this beautiful bridge.
Um, Overlooking the city on this beautiful bridge, and it really felt storybook. And my heart was exploding with joy. I really love this guy and wanted to spend my life with him. And I was kind of hoping that I was hoping he was going to propose, but I didn't want to get my hopes up too much and disappointed. And then he did, and the ring was way too small for me. This is the ring I have on now because it's since been resized, but at the time it didn't even fit on my pinky finger. And this little part of my brain, this eating disorder part of my brain, felt like, there you go again, messing it up. Your body's not right. You're too big. You're too much. You're all wrong. And it just, this little nagging thought, like, still stubbornly hanging out, casting a shadow on this otherwise dreamy sort of night.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the that we don't, that you're not personalizing. It's just kind of a fact of who you live with, right? Like that's how I feel. And I think in recovery, for me, I'm not sure if you've experienced this, the frequency of it is so much, I mean, so much less. The intensity of it is so much less, you know, and I can label it now like, hey, what's going on over there? What's, you know, what's happening, instead of it really feeling true inside of me. Is that how you experience it?
Absolutely. I sometimes think of it as like the radio station that used to just be playing in my brain 24/7. And now it just comes around, the dial like just gets a little nudge once in a while. And right when I think when I'm in my best place, it can just bring me to more compassion, to more, it can really help me, but it's also still that eating disorder radio station, in my experience, it's awful. Like it's really small-minded, it's
Uh,
mean, it's petty, it's
well, and it's such a thief. I mean, like, listen
yeah,
to the story.
yeah. It's
Like,
ridiculous. It's
no, it's
boring.
not. I mean, I would feel the exact same way. Like, this is the dream. Why isn't 100%? Why is this finger stealing, 20% of this most important moment for me? I think it's very valid. I'm with you on it. All right. So far, 3/4 of the way in the book, this is the most mind-blowing, profound thing that I've read. I want to hear everything you have to say about it. It's only on page 13. So for those of you listening, you really want to go buy this book. This is page 13. Ready? I'm going to read it slowly. Eating disorders are a symptom of a patriarchal, misogynistic culture. The idea that women's bodies exist to please, to be judged. But those of us who suffer from them are not necessarily bad feminists. We are humans. We are doing the best we can. This culture is not optional. It is the air we breathe. When we reach out to each other, we can do a whole lot better. Understanding this is not a cure, but it is a start for food people and for all people. Unpack that for me, friend.
Well,
What, that little ditty? That came out of your soul. I was like, I literally read that like 15 times. I was like, I don't even know what to think about this.
yeah. So I used to think, I would read things about body positivity, and
Can you say body positivity again, Hannah?
I would,
Hannah, I used to read things about body positivity.
I used to read things about body positivity and nod along and think, oh yes, this applies to everybody else besides me. And clearly that's not rationally coherent. But I think an eating disorder is not a rational thing. So I did really think, if I'm starving myself, right, I'm a terrible feminist because dieting is a tool of a patriarchy, which I do believe.
Me too.
But right, but it doesn't. But it's like such an interesting, like, we can know better, but an eating disorder isn't about knowing better. It's a disorder. It's disease, or it's not something we're choosing. So I feel like kind of reconciling that has been a process.
Hannah,
But
can you say it again? Hannah, can you
they
say,
can both
Hannah,
of these things can be.
can you say, and reconciling that has been a process?
Reconciling that has been a process, and these things can both be true, that we live in this world that is so harsh and punishing and values such a narrow definition of beauty, and also that I am not a bad person or a bad feminist for my own struggles and my own experience.
And how did you I think that, I made this decision. Like, I realized I was like really spiritually, physically, like allergic to these foods. I eliminated them. it was the greatest freedom I've ever felt and still feel to this day. Like, and I would never not do that as a function of my eating disorder recovery, period. And what I love about who I'm talking about is that that's not your truth. And I really want people to hear how, like, what did you come to in all of it?
Yes, I read something about um, some like little book somewhere that said that we have to not eat flour and sugar and dairy or something.
Well, we
And I
don't have
thought,
to do anything. Don't you
yes,
tell me what to do, little book.
exactly that, right. That's what I thought. And I thought, I don't know about that. And let's see. So for me, I I have the eating disorder that has a perfectionist spin on everything. And if I, a brain that tells me that if I don't eat something, that thing is like the magical scepter, like glowing in the night, that I will dream about. And for me, I kind of feel like I've made peace putting these foods that once were really scary for me into their right size places. And I definitely have put boundaries around foods. Maybe I don't have them in my home. I will only go out and share them with other people during an occasion that feels like the right way. In Feast, I wrote about my last binge with this like gigantic platter of cookies. And for many years, like I would never bake cookies or have cookies in my house. But if I was with someone at a bakery and we shared a cookie, that felt to me like right sized in the right place.
Yeah.
So I
Wait,
feel like
Hannah,
it's been
can you
this
say that again?
process of
Hannah,
kind of,
that felt like right sized in the right place. This is like fucking gold. I'm so into what's going on here. Thank you.
that felt like the right size, the right place. So it's been this journey of kind of renegotiating my relationship with food in general, but also these specific foods that were trouble for me and are not so much anymore. And it's been a slow process of change.
And how do you like distinguish what feels in integrity or what feels like a nourishing relationship with food, and what to, like, how do you make those? I just know for me, it's like it works and it doesn't. And I could answer that
Yeah.
question too, by the way, like if it's talking too much and if it isn't. And I also want to say for me, while we're talking about me, I think that this relationship with food just evolves all the time as I evolve. Right.
I completely agree. I think you kind of said a big part of it in the question for me is that in an ideal world, I feel this peace and quiet and serenity around my food choices. So I know when my brain gets like really noisy around something that I'm eating or thinking about eating, that maybe there could be a different choice. I think that's like, and it's kind of tough because it involves a lot of like tuning in to how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, what's going on, and a lot of messing up and thinking, oh yeah, I think I really do try to choose kind of the quiet choice.
But wait. You just said the most important thing, that this is like the truest part, like a lot of messing up, a lot. But this is like, because that's the truth of it, right? The only way we learn is through being like, oh man, that did not work for me. And yet diet culture, patriarchy, all the stuff is like, well, you're terrible. So you should probably just go roll in a corner and hate yourself, you know?
Yes. So I think my eating disorder, right, was all about these like rules and perfectionism and right or wrong, good or bad. And this other side of things is like, okay, I'm going to mess up because I'm human. And then what? Like, right, then where do I go from there? Do I, if I had this cookie and it felt noisy, like, do I go eat 12 more cookies? Or do I like call someone and have a walk and do
Yeah.
something else with my day?
Well, and I think well, I'm going to mess up because I'm in a relationship with food, and relationships are messy, especially when they're great, right? Especially when they're deep and profound. Like, you got to do a lot of sewing up when you mess it. I mean, that's my teacher, Marsha Linehan, in dialectical behavioral therapy. She says, DBT therapists need to be trained seamstresses. And that's a very patriarchal thing to say, but nevertheless, what she's saying is, if you're going to be down and dirty with someone who is in the deepest, darkest spots of their life, you're probably going to say things that don't work, right? If you're really being vulnerable and authentic and brave. So you're going to be like, oops, sorry, let me heal that. Like, my bad. So yes to all of this.
Right. And constantly changing and evolving, and hopefully, sorry. Sort of.
You do you, babe. Ashley, my producer, is just going to be like, love you guys and all the editing I'm doing.
Just that it's this relationship is constantly changing and evolving and hopefully growing, right? But there's growing pains and there's seasons of life. And I think in my eating disorder brain doesn't like that.
There's growing pains, Hannah. There's growing pains. There's seasons of life. Got to go back to that.
There's growth, so there's growing pains and different seasons of life. And the eating disorder part of my brain hates that because it wants everything to be like static and clear. And
it's just tell me what I do. And you're like, I'm pregnant. I don't know. I got to learn, right? Like, exactly. I'm in Italy. I got to, but this is the whole thing, right? Like, that's exactly, I just think I wish this is, just rewind this and listen to this over and over again, my loves. Like, this is the jam. And then you're in wisdom and you're really able to say, oh, this doesn't work for me. Oh, they said I had to eat 150 more calories. I have a baby in my belly. Oh, how am I going to do that? Oh, I'm going to talk about my feelings. It's amazing. Well, looking back, what do you think are like some of the most important turning point? Because I just love that recovery from eating disorder just looks so different and so the same, right? Because I've sat with you for a lot of years and we've nodded heads a lot together in such different experiences, such similar experiences. And I think that's really so important, right? If you could look back and see like, okay, like here are the major turning points in me, really healing from this eating disorder. What would you say the top times are? Just because I'm sure people are listening being like, I want this. How do I get this?
Yeah, I think that healing for me has been this like very slow burn. But then there are these moments where I kind of realize how far I've come. I wrote about one of them in Plenty because for most of my life, really, the scale has been this terrifying, huge thing in my life. I used to weigh myself kind of ritualistically, and that number would determine whether I was allowed to like myself or hate myself, or it was just this.
Believe it. It's the greatest thief of all time. That scale. It's the greatest terrorist and thief. I mean,
it really. Yeah. Oh man. It was brutal. And one of these huge recovery actions I took was just not weighing myself anymore. And when I go to the doctor, I've been going to the doctor. I'm starting to go every 2 weeks to the doctor now that I'm in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And every time I ask for a blind weight. But while I was researching a few things for this book and looking at my records, I went into this health portal that I didn't know existed and saw all of these weights for me. All of these blind ways were no longer blind through years past. And I just know in the past that would have sent me into the incredible spiral of
wait, Hannah, I just know in the past.
I just know in the past this would have sent me straight into this spiral of all kinds of self-loathing and negativity and insanity. And
to say the
I
least.
definitely, I definitely had to like take a deep breath.
Yeah, like what did you do? Like you can't unsee that. Like what did you do? And so how many years had you not seen your weight? And all of a sudden,
I want to say like 6 years.
Oh my God.
It was like it was my OB/GYN that I've been to annually. So it had
part of them were pregnant weights?
And then pregnant weights. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was intense, but I swear I didn't feel nothing. Like it was weird, and it was a weird afternoon, but it didn't really shake me. I was able to like step away from my laptop for a second, get a glass of water. I called someone who I knew would understand to just like download this whole experience.
What did she say? Like, because I think the power circles are the key to half of this, right? Because the opposite of addiction is connection. And so like you called someone in your power circle because you knew that they would be able to do this with you. Do you remember ish what she said back?
Yeah, I think she just kind of, and this was the same person actually that had convinced me, despite my strongest arguments, that maybe I didn't have to weigh myself all the time. Maybe the world wouldn't end if I didn't know what that number was on the scale. And so here I was telling her about this, and I think, yeah, she was like, now what? What are you gonna do with the rest of your day? I think I could see in that moment kind of two roads to go down, and I could obsess about this. It could spin around my brain in these quick circles forever.
Wait, Hannah.
Or what if
Hannah, I could obsess about this. It's amazing though, by the way.
I could obsess about this forever, and it could just spin around in my brain in these fast circles. Or I could try to the best of my ability to let it go, to share about it. Sharing about it, I think, is like, you can't just ignore it. So that's the first step. Like,
but I think sharing about it with somebody who isn't going to be like, you're crazy, like somebody who's like, hey, that's some crazy making stuff going on there. Now, What are you going to do? I mean, I just literally like, I had such an exhale when you were saying what she said to you, because I think that's just such a key to find your people in this, right? Find people that aren't going to judge it and aren't going to necessarily okay it. Like you really have to, and that takes practice too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to just not be alone with it, because I think right when it's just me and these thoughts, it's really a dark place. But the moment I can get some light in with these loving people, it's a whole new territory.
Oh man, that's like literally what I was thinking. Like, what if she just had all those numbers and just stay and had nobody to talk to? The only person you would be talking to in that moment is your eating disorder. And we know how she rolls.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of why it felt like such a big moment, was I knew what that would be like, and it would just be like pure unadulterated misery. Just like, I was so mean to myself. And and I still had that like little, I still have that part of my brain, right? That radio station that says like, oh, what is, like, that number is not a good number. Should you go to your eating disorder again? But then thank God I have now like been slowly building this bigger muscle that knows that truth is not my truth. That's
but I think that's the part, right? Like that's the part I love about your writing and just you, like, it's not an evil thought, right? Like it's a normal thought. And so when we don't have to be so reactive to it, right? Like that happened to me the other day. My goddaughter took a picture of me in the pool. She was like so excited to like contribute to my Instagram. It was so sweet. And she shows me the picture. I'm in a bikini on a float. And she shows me the picture, and I want to be like, hey, can you take this over? Because my belly just looks so gross and I'm so ashamed of this picture. And of course, I'm not like going to say that to an 11-year-old who, as per the paragraph we just read in your book, it's in her drinking water to hate her body, right? And so I was like, hey, Mal, sit back on that. What's going on here? Right. Like, and I didn't think I was a bad person for having that thought. I thought I was like someone recovering from an eating disorder who my first impulsive reactive thought was pretty gnarly, pretty self-hating, not appreciating this amazing body that's brought me through so much. And I wonder, if we could soften to those thoughts, we'd have half the problems that we have with eating disorders.
That's so true. I think even that general compassion towards ourselves, that's taken me a long time to build. And I mean, those photo thoughts, those ones for me have been pesky. Right, I see a picture of myself, and the first thing my brain goes to is something Oh, oh, like that noise.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's like, how much
but
attention do you pay it? Like your kid, like if your kid's like, screaming, you're not going to go up and like pay tons of attention to that. You're like, I'll let that pass.
right, and that feels like the sort of miracle because I used to not let it pass like that. It would just hold on to it and like let it
Yeah. I used to pay
really
so
eat
much.
away
Right.
at
That used
whole
to
day,
be
the
the
whole
right.
week.
That used to be the whole thing. That's such a beautiful way to say it. I used to not let it pass. That thing would stick to my mind. And then that would be the whole conversation that would lead to like more self-harm with food, restricting, binging, whatever. And here we have a new life where it just doesn't, we don't let it control us.
Yeah, so that in and of itself is amazing. And then, I still, but I wonder if we'll ever get to the point where we don't have those first thoughts of
You know
butts
what
when
I
we
think
look at
about that
photos.
though? I really have a thought on this. I think this is my thought about me. I think sometimes if I didn't have, I would not seek anymore. That those moments in my life where I have these moments that are so not aligned with who I am make me have to dig deeper into my soul, into my spiritual work, into my connections, into my beliefs, which I hope, fingers crossed, even the function of this podcast makes me a better podcaster, makes me a better therapist, makes me a more compassionate person. Like I frame it like that. Like I frame it like those are just lessons that are getting handed to me and I think if I didn't have them anymore, I'd be like, I'm just gonna go lay on a beach and not be helpful to anybody. I'm good. But what do you think?
I love that. I think so too, right? If I didn't have any challenges, right, I wouldn't be a good writer or a good mother or a good friend or I do think that these things are teachers when we let them be.
Believe it. Hannah, let me ask you a question. What do you think we're really craving? So when you think about all of this noise and all of this, like, what do you think we're really craving?
Well, you said one of my favorite truths, which is that connection is the opposite of
Oh,
addiction.
you have to
And
say it again.
I'm
Hold on. Hold
craving
on. Wait.
connection.
So just start the whole thing. You said,
You said one of my favorite truths, which is that addiction is the opposite of connection, or connection is the opposite of addiction. And for me, I am craving connection. I think, from friends and lovers and family and friends, like just this. And I think that's one of the reasons I love food is because it's one way that we get to connect with other people. Um, for me, my eating disorder was just so damn lonely.
Mm.
And there's nothing like this sort of closeness and vulnerability that can be really, really hard, but it can be, for me, the most soul filling, beautiful part of life.
Yeah. And I think I just think about those moments in my eating disorder, my addictions, when I was like with people feeling so lonely. Right. And I think something that you're saying in all of this, which is connection with people who understand it. Right. And then not necessarily eating disorders, but connection with people who are open minded and heart opened and validating and who nourish you. Right. And who nourish you. Like, because that's the other worst feeling around is being in a group of people feeling completely lonely. And that's what the eating disorder, I just want you alone at the end of the
Yeah. I
day.
mean, I feel like I wasted so much. I mean, wasted is not fair, but
Except for
I
you write
spent,
pretty awesome books as a function of that. I mean, and a
but I,
thousand other things, but yes.
yeah, but it's a terrible way to feel. And I spent a lot of time feeling that way, being surrounded by people, but feeling so alone. And I feel that way very rarely these days, which is an amazing gift of all this.
Yeah. I just think everybody, I just think your books are amazing. I like texted Hannah after I read the book. I was like, I just devoured that book. And now I'm restricting on your other book, Plenty. But wow, I mean, if you want a nice little read, this book just came out September 1st. I've been sitting with it for a few months, not to brag, but I'm sort of bragging because it's that good. I can't wait for your third one. I love you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope maybe you'll come back because I think we have a lot of amazing things to talk about together.
Thank you so much, Molly. The love is very much mutual, and thank you for doing what you do.